This is one of the hot scenes that is about heat and chemistry.
Oh, that's the artistic portion of the film.
That's right. So just give her a little room, react normally, be sensitive above all, because in this scene, Daisy's going to take off her blouse.
Steve Martin.
You're offering yourself to him in order to save the planet.
And Eddie Murphy.
Awesome.
Bowfinger.
You're doing great.
Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, August.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson, and here tonight we are going to be discussing the final movie in the month of March with Eddie Murphy. We are going to be discussing 1999's Bowfinger. So we're going a little bit forward here in the timeline. Of course, you should leave a 4 or 5-star review on Apple and Spotify to get those algorithms going. Please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Click the bell icon for notifications. Please find me on BlueSky at Jerome C 1985. Brian, we need to sign you up for BlueSky because Twitter is just, it's a Nazi haven right now. So you need to join the bandwagon. You need to succumb to peer pressure.
I have some terms, but I'll have to look up these terms to see if they kind of match my terms. Look,
are you going to enter into a negotiation with the Skeeters, or?
Listen, the only reason I use Twitter now is to post eBay listings, and that's only it. And I just close it out, and then that actually does help my algorithm and my eBay listings since it gets views and stuff. So if Blue Sky can give me the same kind of traction to get my eBay listings off the ground, then for sure, because
Twitter. I'm gonna repeat what I said earlier. There will be less Nazis if you post on Blue Sky at least.
For sure, and maybe I'll post some opinions or two, but I haven't really wanted to do that in a while. But you never know. You never know. I might have a comeback of my Brian's stupid opinions or something like that. But right now the focus is on.
You are responsible for help building the following of a Twitter account by simply tweeting out PWG results. So I know that's a tough act to follow. What?
What's PWG?
Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, the former West Coast Wrestling Federation of note.
Oh, that's from the past era. Yeah.
It's from the before time. It's like it's like we're Captain America and Scarlet and Red Widow after the snap. Like it's after.
Oh my God.
About...
Oh boy, because I've heard some things about PWG folks that it's looking like it's never coming back. But let's not speculate.
Sometimes you got to let things go, man. Like I think there's something to be said for that. Like it's better to go out on top than to just. They kind of faded away, I guess, a little bit at the end, but they've got quite a legacy. Speaking of legacies, we are going to stay in Los Angeles because we are talking about Bowfinger. I like this movie. It's a perfectly cromulent movie. It's not my favorite. I have a weird relationship with Steve Martin. Like I like Steve Martin, but most of the time when I watch a Steve Martin movie, I'm like, well, that was okay. But with the exception of like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and a couple of other things, I'm never like, wow, that Steve Martin movie was so great. And like this movie's fine. I think Eddie Murphy's performance is probably the standout. This has to be one of Eddie Murphy's best performances for sure, given some of the other dreck that he was in the 90s. But it just feels like he's kind of in a different movie than everybody else, and he's the only one that's truly funny. I think Heather Graham kind of gets better as the movie gets going and gives her more to do, even though when you read the backstory about who Heather Graham is based off of, it kind of adds a certain level of darkness to it. Have you read about this, Brian?
Anne Heche, and that explains the lesbian joke at the end of the movie.
Yeah, not great, especially given what happened to Anne Heche and given all those things.
Well, for the record, I guess that we have to also add that Steve Martin was dating her during the pre-production of the movie or something.
Yeah,
it's production.
I don't know, man.
But I guess that's where he got the okay, I guess. But it's not like he casted her in the role, right?
I don't know, man. It comes 25 years later, it just comes off as kind of gross. Like not just because of the age disparity, but because of like the way that he treats the Heather Graham character. And if the Heather Graham character is a stand-in for Anne Heche, then man, I don't know. Again, I don't blame Heather Graham for this. I think Heather Graham does as good of a job as she can do. And this was kind of her heyday. Like Boogie Nights, she was in this and in Austin Powers. I don't think people realize how big the Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me was. Like that sequel was a huge deal in the summer of 1999, and Heather Graham was a big part of it. So this is kind of her peak, and I think she's fine. I think, like I said, I think Eddie Murphy's really good. I think Steve Martin is fine. I just want to point out, Brian, there's the most important fact of this movie. This is the second movie involving Robert Downey Jr. and a FedEx delivery. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Robert Downey for a second. So this is not necessarily part of his comeback. This is still him trying to get in the good graces of people's, goodwill and stuff. He's only got 3 scenes in the movie. He's a very, very minor character. He's more of a character that kind of is more of an antagonist to Steve Martin's character to kind of get him on his journey. But for what it was, like, he plays a good scumbag producer. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, for his
this is when he was on drugs, to be clear.
Yeah, and he his line about his wife was pretty gnarly. Talking about how he lost the kids in the divorce, but he got the car, and that's all he wanted. Jesus Christ! But that's such a Hollywood thing to do, man. But yeah, and then the fact that like he notices that his one and only unique car is somehow in the movie, just that look on his face just has me dying all the time, and that's the end of the movie. But that's just one of those little Robert Downey Jr. kind of moments, you know what I'm saying? That for like a little 10-second snippet like that, he can kind of like give us a great reaction. So I thought he did a good job for 3 scenes.
I mean, he's got a reputation as being a really, really good actor. I mean, I think he's kind of been lost to Iron Man, and I think Oppenheimer was a reminder of just how good he is, and now he's immediately going back into the Marvel universe, and it just feels really unfortunate. I don't know. Is it a situation where like doing these roles and doing these kind of things is triggering, and Marvel is kind of safe for him to go because there's some distance? But I don't know. And again, if that's the reason, then I think it's totally understandable. And again, given the money they're offering him, I certainly would not turn it down. But it just feels like we could be getting a lot better movies out of Robert Downey Jr. than what we are. And I think this movie kind of shows that. Like, he's not in comic book mode. He's not even really like in super Robert Downey Jr. mode, like he is in Iron Man or even Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. But this is something very different, and it was appreciated.
For sure. And I think we got to also credit Terrence Stamp for being this like underrated comedy actor, because we know him as like the, Zod and all these serious roles that he's in. But I think him as a deadpan delivery actor for the lines that he was given for this movie, just tremendous stuff from him. Being the leader of the
I'm just excited that with hindsight, we now get to say that Dr. Doom and Zod were in the same movie.
Yeah, in the same movie with Eddie Murphy playing 2 roles. So it's a crazy cast, and it's crazy to think about looking back on it. But just the fact that Terrence Stamp could take this role, knowing that he probably just got it because like he's got a serious look on his face, and they probably just told him deadpan, and fucking he just nailed it. And the thing about what are the 3 things, Keith, or what are the 3 things, Kit? And then he's just telling him there's no aliens, blah blah blah, and don't show your junk to the Laker girls and shit like that. And you realize that the character that Eddie Murphy's playing is truly like a guy that's like on the edge mentally. Like, the dude has some really messed up sexual issues. He's a predator, and like somehow he's like this big star.
I mean, I would argue Steve Martin is also a predator as well. I mean, the movie is kind of gross towards women, which I didn't realize that was a part of Steve Martin's comedy. But man, like if this is an entree into his head, then yeah, I'm not totally impressed by that. But it's there's some very strange choices, and again, I think some of this is of course, with hindsight, and I'm not sure people would have the awareness now that they did then. But I think what I think works about this movie is, to me, so I think there's the thing that works about this movie is I think Eddie Murphy's great. I feel, especially after watching The Player, and maybe it's because I watched that movie so recently that I can't help but compare it. It felt like this movie either needed to be more acidic toward Hollywood and make Steve Martin more sympathetic, or it needed to be funnier, because what we got, it just felt like there was an imbalance.
I think the first act is slow, but I think once
in a 90-minute movie, it should not take as long as it does to get going.
Yeah, but once the production part of the movie starts going, like they're actually filming the movie on the sets and everything, and just going crazy trying to film around Eddie Murphy, I think that's when it just kicks into this different gear.
I mean, because you're letting Eddie Murphy kind of cook.
Exactly, yeah. And then once it starts going, it's like it just never stops. And all the scenes afterward, it's like there's not a lot of filler towards the end of the movie. Like the beginning scenes where like they put all the filler, and then everything after the second act is just everything is what you need, and it goes from about an hour straight of just, for me, it was like an hour straight of like laughing every minute because I was really connecting with a lot of the jokes. Not so much in the first 15 minutes or so, but once it started getting going, I was like, this is some really funny satirical stuff going on right now. And then once Eddie Murphy like plays his own brother, that's when it becomes even funnier, I think, because I don't know, just something about this character that he creates as his brother character, the way that he smiles and the way that he's just reacting on the camera, it's just something about it. It's almost like a Clark Kent Superman type situation where it's like he's playing these two, I mean, they're both brothers, obviously, but they're just two people on different sides of the spectrum. And like this guy that he portrays, this nerd, is so like ridiculously
he's playing Urkel and Stefan, right? That's what he's doing.
That's pretty much it. But I think the Urkel aspect of it, I think his idea, I don't know whose idea it was, but I think the braces was a genius move because it adds a little more to the smile, and it makes him have to smile even wider to show you the braces. It's little details like that. I think when you add a little detail to a character,
I kind of wish the commentary was stronger about Eddie Murphy playing two characters, because this is something that he obviously did in The Nutty Professor, and I feel like was there another movie where he did multiple roles as well?
Coming to America.
Right, Coming to America. So he's done this before. I just wish it was more of a commentary on that, and it wasn't just, okay, we're doing a Hollywood kind of pseudo parody, and Eddie Murphy's just doing two roles again. I kind of wish there's more teeth, and I think again that's kind of what I want. Steve Martin as a writer, just I don't think that's his brand in terms of his writing. Like the way that I would describe his writing is I think that his strength is kind of doing a New Yorker style, and it's fitting because a lot of his stuff does get published in the New Yorker, which is why I think something like Only Murders in the Building is kind of his, like, that is the perfect wavelength for Steve Martin and his writing, just because I think that show is so specific. And I think Steve Martin kind of being older really helps that as well. And you watch that show, and I think it really does match the sensibility of Steve Martin, and the whole show is kind of built around that comedy, and it works. Whereas this, it just feels like he's going for something with a little bit more of an edge, and it isn't quite successful. And to be fair, like I was reading some of the commentary around this movie, and it is something that's extremely popular. It definitely got a lot of rave reviews in 1999, and it definitely had a lot of positivity. I don't know if people revisited this 25 years later, but they have the same opinions and viewpoints. I mean, like I said, I don't think this movie is bad, but I wasn't as high on it as other people are. Again, I think when Eddie Murphy is on the screen, I think this movie is electric. And I think you're really seeing the fact that it is something that is worth watching. But I think when Eddie Murphy isn't on the screen, then I think that the movie is very inconsistent. And like I said, I think Steve Martin, for me, I think if I were to illustrate why this movie doesn't work, then it's because Steve Martin is kind of leaning too much into like either being a creep or not being sympathetic enough. And that's why I felt like if the movie was more acidic, and by acidic, I'm specifically referencing like the Hollywood aspect of it and making everybody else kind of more unlikable. I think if everybody else was more unlikable than Steve Martin, then I think this would work much better.
See, I think he didn't want to push too many buttons because I think Steve Martin deep down is still like that good guy that doesn't want to totally piss everyone off. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, I think you're right.
So I think that reflects in his writing, obviously. So he does make fun of Scientology a lot in this, which I do appreciate. Like 25 years later, like not realizing what that was when I was a kid, and of course now.
I mean, you could argue that he's ahead of Hollywood. You could argue that he was ahead of it.
Yeah, for sure. Making fun of it and just like making everyone who was a member of it look like a fucking idiot, and that's purposeful. So, and he obviously knew about the John Travolta stuff around this time and Tom Cruise. And even in '99, that was like kind of like a not talked about thing as much until Tom Cruise went on Oprah. So, and the whole Katie and his wife with Katie, what's her last name?
Katie Holmes.
Katie Holmes.
Katie Holmes and Leah Remini has done kind of a show about.
Yeah, so that kind of like opened it up.
Savage's wife is missing, and there's a lot to it. I mean, it's just look. I'm not the person to talk about religion because I generally dislike any form of organized religion, but Scientology is pretty much at the top of the mountain in terms of bad religions.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Terrence Stamp is that leader figure. I think that kind of fit really well because he's just like no selling everything, not trying to be humorous, and he's got that deadpan delivery. So it just kind of added to it. So I think that portrayal of Scientology, that kind of hit a little hard for some people, considering that Steve Martin, like I just said, is trying to not piss people off, but it felt like he had like a grudge against Scientology while making this, which, I'm sure he did. And I'm sure he still does. So that really, I really like that aspect of it. What I did like as well is like this subtle nod. Now that I'm older, it's almost like a subtle nod to the Muppet Show, where you got Steve Martin in the Kermit role, and I guess Jamie Kennedy would be in the Fozzie role, and then they start building the.
Now I want to see the Muppets just remake Bowfinger.
That's what I'm saying. I think that like you could do this in a Muppet version and still make it really good, and then you could still have Eddie Murphy maybe in the same role, but and then just
it's like the meme where everybody is a Muppet except one character, so you just have Eddie Murphy.
Yeah,
how has Eddie Murphy ever done anything with the Muppets? That feels like a mistake.
Might be too safe for him. You never know, but. Yeah, I just kind of had that
vibe in a Haunted Mansion movie. I don't know, man.
Oh, that's right, and that's also a tie to the Muppets.
Dude, once that man got arrested for soliciting a prostitute, then he definitely went the family route, which I kind of understand, but I can't help but feel like we missed out on some great Eddie Murphy performances that we'll never get it back, man. We'll just never get it back.
Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is that I guess originally they wrote the role of Kit for Keanu Reeves, which I think that would have been a major, major failure if Keanu Reeves was in the role, because it would not even be funny. I think it would just fall flat on its face right off the bat. So thank God they got Eddie Murphy instead.
It flat out would not. It wouldn't work. I totally agree with you.
I can't even imagine what they were thinking when he wrote the script that way. But once Eddie Murphy comes into play, it's like, oh, this is definitely what the movie should have been when you put it on paper. So thank God that Eddie Murphy just went into the meeting and he just immediately accepted the role because he wanted to work with Steve Martin and Frank Oz. So it kind of fit. And, I also kind of think that, like, Steve Martin is obviously trying to do this, like, this tribute to Roger Corman and Ed Wood. But, like, at the same time, it's like, it's also this thing about living or trying to accomplish your dreams in Hollywood kind of thing, which, they kind of taught us about when you're in film class and here in CSUN in Northridge, California, in the heart of the San Fernando Valley next to LA. And it's kind of like everyone has that dream. So it's kind of like this movie's definitely for those LA dreamers that come to LA trying to be a star or something. But that's why I kind of like that. I think that's the heart of the movie for me. And that's why I kind of like really, I don't know, really get into the second half and third. The second half and all that. It's just really like heartwarming kind of. I know these are creeps, but like it's just the crew. I think when you see the crew themselves trying to like make this happen when they got nothing going on in their lives, I think that's really what gets me into like, oh, this is the real heart of the movie. It's these background people that are just trying to go through Steve Martin and trying to make it big with them, and they kind of do. So, and spoiler alert. So obviously the plot of the movie is they can't get Kit to be in the movie, so they're filming around him, and they make the joke that like, I didn't know I had to get permission for him to be in the movie. It's like, dude, you've been in the industry for how long? So yeah, and then you got that going on, and then once that they realized that they shot some extra footage of Kit around LA, Kit exposed himself to the Laker girls, which he predicted or said he was going to do in the beginning. And then they use that as leverage against him, and then that's the Hollywood, dark Hollywood ending, I guess.
I hate how fake Hollywood is.
I mean,
right?
I mean, what do you want? I mean, look, he got him to say the line at the end, and he didn't have to pay the guy, but I guess he just had to destroy the footage in some kind of legal verbal agreement or whatever it was written out. So Eddie Murphy's a creep in this movie, but his brother's not, apparently, because the brother ends up becoming this B-movie star, which, I don't know. Did you find the ending offensive? I just found it, like, hilarious, thinking, like, this is their idea of a cheap kung fu B-movie, and yet it's probably not that far off from, like, a Show Brothers.
If the director was Taiwanese, my answer would be, I would say it's okay, but it's Frank Oz, so I'm a little bit more questioning of it. I mean, like this is the thing that I always say is like Asian racism has kind of been acceptable up until like 5 years ago. I mean, it just feels like we've had like How I Met Your Mother infamously had yellowface in it. So it just feels like Asian racism is so much more acceptable than racism against other people.
See, the thing with the scene is like it's not like Eddie Murphy or Steve Martin are playing Asian characters. I don't think that's
Right. No, I want to be clear. Like, yes,
Yeah.
they are not. They are
But
not
they're
playing
just making
Asian
fun of kung fu movies in general with like the way
Correct,
filming
yes.
it.
I mean,
And,
it's
like,
still kind of weird, but it just doesn't. It
But I
doesn't.
was laughing because it's not just it's Eddie Murphy as the brother character Jiff doing that shtick, and you can clearly tell like he has no coordination, and they're just trying to shoot around it. That's the shit that I find hilarious. Is like, how are they going to cover this up in post? How are they going to cover this up in post? And somehow they just covered in post. So I'm watching this ending sequence, and I'm like, they're going to have a lot of editing to do. But it's not even that they're stopping and moving like the camera around. They're just doing long takes the whole time, which of course feels very Roger Corman. You know what I'm saying? That idea of like, let's get a movie done in like a week, guys. Can we do it in a week with $2,000 in single bills? Let's do it, guys. And that's what that was. So yeah, I just like this idea of like this old school B movie making magic mixed with like late '90s Hollywood. So because like it feels like this is the end of an era too, like the end of like the B movie era that kind of like was able to make money in Hollywood, and that's kind of what Roger Corman.
I mean, I think the B movies have evolved. I guess like
They
they're
become
still
more
being made.
production A level, right? This is definitely
But I feel like B movies have become more like pastiche, and it feels like a lot of the movies are done in like Central Europe, and that's how you get like Bruce Willis infamously doing all the movies he did. So like we're still getting like straight to VOD movies, but they don't feel like B movies because the production values are not that different. I guess that's part of the issue is that like with a B movie in the old days, like you could just tell it was a B movie, whereas now it feels like it's much harder to decipher.
Yeah, that's why I kind of feel like this is like a movie kind of signifying the end of an era in Hollywood, you know, that B movie era. Because
I mean, that's what 1999 is. 1999 is the end of an era in so many ways. It's like the last great movie year with so many great original movies, and then everything, like it just feels like we've fallen into this pattern of so many sequels and franchise-based movies. And you know, something like Mickey 17 is opening to $20 million, which is not terrible, but I mean, that's supposed to be kind of a big movie, and it's just very concerning. Like the original movies, if it's not a horror movie, if it's not a John Wick type action movie, then it doesn't feel like it's finding a lot of success right now, and it sucks.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, and my feelings of that, because I really want to watch Mickey 17. I just, as of this recording, hadn't had a chance to, but I was looking at the box office you were mentioning. So it's a little concerning, but I don't know. Maybe they just spent too much on Mickey 17, you know. But that's a whole different discussion.
That's absolutely a separate conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, for 20 million, I would say that's for what I would expect, you know, from like something like that. So,
but I would too. I would not spend $200 million on that movie.
Right. So that's another issue, but it does tie into this end of this era, and I want to mention that summer of '99. In terms of like big comedies, like this made money. This had a budget of $55 million, grossed $98 worldwide. But you also mentioned Austin Powers 2, which was huge. I saw that in theaters like twice, maybe.
Yes. I don't think people now appreciate how popular that movie was.
Yeah.
Like it was ubiquitous. Like it hit, other than Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, that is probably the most zeitgeisty movie of the year, along with The Matrix as well. But I feel like even The Matrix was a little bit different.
And you also had American Pie come out this year. I think I just mentioned Mystery Men. Like, there's a lot of big comedies that came out in '99, and it feels like afterward we only get like one good comedy a year. Does that?
I don't even know that we're getting that anymore. I mean, all the comedies are being. I mean, Happy Gilmore is literally going to be released on Netflix in June. And I think
that's a mistake too. I think that's a mistake.
I think it's an enormous mistake. I don't know, man. Like, I feel like that movie could gross between $75 and $100 million. And the fact that they're just not releasing it Like the fact that they're just going to release it on streaming is just it's unbelievable to me. But I don't know. It's not the
Also,
industry.
Big Daddy was this year too, '99, which is another that made a lot of money too.
Not a movie I enjoy, but a movie that was extremely successful.
Yeah, and like, how many? We just mentioned like 5 comedies that made money in. Oh, maybe not Mystery Men, but a lot of comedies made money in '99. So it's like, wow, you know what I'm saying? Like,
People don't want to laugh anymore, Brian. That's
not to mention Eddie Murphy had Life coming out 4 months later, which became a cult classic because I think that's more of a drama than a comedy. Honestly, it does have great comedy moments, but I think overall that movie hits hard as they get older and all that bullshit they have to go through. We'll talk about maybe Life in a different episode later down the line because I think that's more. I want to say that's more like I want to do more of a Martin Lawrence kind of focus because right now we're doing Eddie Murphy. But like I just, Life is a whole different discussion, obviously. But I think that's definitely a cult classic at this point. But Bowfinger, man, I think it's a strong like 7.5 out of 10. It's not an 8 because the writing is not as strong, but it hits with all this like ad lib dialogue that they had to do, or not had to do, but they just decided to come up with because Eddie Murphy was at first doing what the lines were stating on the page, but then they realized, let Eddie Murphy be Eddie Murphy. Just let him have ad-libs here and there. And once he started doing that, all the cast started doing it, and that's when I think things started to pick up for the cast and or the script wise, because everything started clicking once they started doing the ad-libbing. So I think that's a big part of it. So yeah, 7.5 is like right perfect, I think, for this movie. And I've seen this movie so many times.
I'm at a 6. I'm not as sold on it as you are. Like I said, I think it's a perfectly cromulent movie. You could do a lot worse than watch this, but it's not my favorite. I think it's fine. I do like Eddie Murphy is the reason to watch the movie now.
For sure. And God, that it's so crazy that I think that's the same jacket that Steve Martin has in The Jerk. I could be wrong on that, but I feel like that's the same jacket. And I don't know if have you seen The Jerk? I know it's kind of like a mixed bag for some people.
I have not seen The Jerk, and it's funny because I recently watched the Steve Martin documentary thing that was on Apple, so I've definitely been thinking about watching Roxanne and The Jerk because I've not seen those. And yeah, maybe we'll do a Steve Martin month at some point, but
maybe a double feature, maybe just to get to him out of the way. But I definitely want to watch Roxanne because I did watch, like I said, I've been on like Siskel and Ebert kicks and whatever, and they both really love Roxanne.
Like every night, I'm getting Siskel and Ebert thoughts from Brian.
Yeah, for sure. But like, they really love Roxanne, and they had this thing about like comparing like Steve Martin was like kind of hit or miss before that, and they didn't like The Jerk. And then once Roxanne came out, they realized, oh, finally this guy finally found it. But then he kind of lost it again because nothing kind of came close to that kind of love that they gave it. So, but I think Bowfinger kind of was that resurrection of it. But then Steve Martin kind of just started writing less, I guess, and then he became a little more serious with Shop Girl. I don't know if you've seen Shop Girl. Is it a quiet place?
It's like a Lost in Translation knockoff. It's fine, but it's like I said, a clear ripoff of another movie.
Yeah, and that's kind of like Steve Martin. I think he's at his best when he's just like doing like wholesome stuff. And then when he tries something like this, he doesn't necessarily knock it out of the park, but still he got most of it right. So I think what we need to watch is Roxanne. To be honest, I think that's what we need to watch to get the full Steve Martin experience, I think, because that's kind of like the height of his powers apparently. But and that was 87 and this is 99, so that kind of tells you a lot. And they also make fun of the fact that I guess he was like, I don't know, they say he was 49 in the movie, but if you do the math based on the whole $1 a week thing that he was saving since he was a kid, it's supposed to be he's 52. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Okay, I thought that was hilarious because that was a math joke, ladies and gentlemen, and you can only pick that up if you like read the trivia notes, because I didn't even pick that up. So that's again the whole age thing in Hollywood. I'm 49, but I can possibly I can pull off 38 or whatever. Just whatever, dude. You're 45. Just say 45 and I'll believe it. But yeah, just Steve Martin in this era, in that transitional era to like, he's about to do that comedy with Queen Latifah in a couple of years, which I don't know. That seemed to be his like last big widespread movie before he
did Cheaper by the Dozen, which wasn't good, but it made a shit ton of money.
Yeah, that also makes FX money, if you know what I'm saying. When it comes to FX putting a movie on 24 hours a day during a holiday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That definitely hits that, scratches that itch for sure.
Yeah, but then I think I think like you mentioned, only Murders in the Building. I think that's probably where he's at his best right now. Like not necessarily being a starring. He was never an A-list player in Hollywood, but I would definitely think he was a great person to rely on for like a script or like a comedy role, and that's kind of what he's doing on Hulu right now. I haven't watched the show, but I think once the show is completed, I might want to check it out in a
I
full
mean,
binge
it's
through.
it's going to be entering its fifth season. It's kind of impressive that it's gotten the run that it has. I mean, it's going to have a solid 50 to 60 episodes, and Steve Martin has said that this is going to be his last thing. Like he's going to ride off into the sunset. He's 79 years old, and I kind of can't blame him. Like this show is a great final act for him. So good. So I say good on him.
Yeah, and I can't help but thinking like if John Candy was alive, what role would he would have played in Bowfinger? And I think he would have played the writer.
Certainly possible. All right, Brian. Next week, Ben Phillips and we are going to be doing our list for this year. We're going to be doing a two-part series, one in April and then part two in July. Brian, Ben and I are going to be ranking the 28 Pixar movies. Are you excited?
I'm excited, and I hope that Bug's Life gets some love because I feel like that movie is so underappreciated, underrated, only because it came out in the shadow of Toy Story. But I hope you guys treat it well and put it on the high part of the list.
I have seen Ben's list. It's the thing is that I don't think our opinions on the movies are going to be that different. But I think the movie that ends up being number one might not be either of our number ones, if that makes sense.
Oh, I believe it because, look, I'm one of those people that likes Wall-E but doesn't think it's this classic. Only because I'm one of those people that, as a kid, saw Short Circuit, and during the whole fucking movie, I'm like, why does this guy look like Johnny Five? You know? And I was one of those people, and I still can't get it out of my head. And if I were to make a choice, I would probably say I think Coco's better than Wall-E.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll get into that next week. So Brian, in 2 weeks, I have a proposal for you. So we are going to be doing for most of April, we are going to do baseball month, but I think in 2 weeks, instead of doing the documentary about the earthquake, Brian, I think we should review Queen of the Ring, and I think we should pair it with the Mariah May Tony Storm trilogy. What do you think?
Wow, that's asking a lot, man. But I've seen the whole trilogy, and I fucking loved it. And I was there, folks, in LA.
You were there. That's why I want to do this.
I know, and it was great. I'll just say that it was a crimson mask that I wanted, and I got both crimson masks. So there you go. But I'm for it, man. Yeah. So I haven't seen Queen of the Ring yet. I want to see it so bad. I'm just worried because usually I go to like two close theaters, either like one near me or the other mall, like one of the two malls. And unfortunately, it's weird that they're not showing it there, and I have to go to some other weird mall that I usually don't go to. So that's not a good sign. But I don't know. Well, I don't know if it's going to be quick to digital. We'll see. But I hope it makes money because it didn't have a good advertising budget. Let's just say that.
It did not. So we will figure that out. So yeah, Brian and I will be back in 2 weeks. Ben and I are back next week, and then the final 3 weeks of April, we are going to be doing our baseball theme. We are going to be kind of finishing up some Ken Burns. We're going to watch the 10th inning. It is the 50th anniversary of the 10th inning. We are also going to be watching Ken Burns' Jackie Robinson documentary. It's fitting to do that in April since it is the anniversary of his debut in baseball. And we are going to be reviewing a documentary that Brian is this is a Brian pick all the way. We are going to be kind of paying tribute to the legendary Fernando Valenzuela by watching his ESPN 30 for 30 about Fernando Mania, which I know you are very much looking forward to.
Yeah, and I'm still shocked that Ken Burns completely cut him out of the most important baseball documentary of all time. Mixed feelings on that one, folks. But
Yep.
Yeah, just at least we get the full story. And these do have. This was shot when he was alive and in better health, so you get the better visual. Because I know that those pictures of Fernando around the time of his death were just so hard. It's so hard to look at. But I think he's in good health when they filmed these interviews, so it's a
What
very
is
positive
up with
story.
what is up with Dodger players and tragic endings? Jackie Robinson dead at 53, Roy Campanella and everything he had to go through. I mean, Sandy Koufax is dead but having to retire so young. There's a lot of tragedy in the Dodgers.
Listen, if something happens like that to Mike Piazza, I don't think I'll have as much feeling because he went to the Mets, and that's a whole different story. And I did stop.
Mike Piazza is. I mean, he's more associated with the Mets at this point.
Yeah.
I guess heaven needed a Dodger, man. Heaven needed.
Oh my goodness! I see what you did there. Any yellow roses?
No yellow roses. But yeah, we will be back next week. So for Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, we'll talk to you next week.